When we first got here, we were like, okay, we need to make a game plan because it was just really, you could only really get in here with a machete. And we're a farm. We need to make money if we want to, keep having the farm. We're farmers. So we started looking around and seeing what trees were harvestable and what trees could make us money and what trees were beneficial to all the other trees. And then we came in here and selectively brought in a dozer and took out the things that weren't beneficial to us and left the things that were. And so it was pretty selective when we did it. Here, everything on this farm was what we wanted. The only thing it wasn't was organic. And so we just figured, well, that's what we were supposed to do, is make this little part of the world organic, and then we can share it with other people and show other people how to garden organic in the tropics. And a lot of people, don't think it can be done, and they don't think it can be done sustainably. And we're hoping to do that, and we're hoping to learn along the way as we do it, because where we farmed before was Alaska, which is a much different climate. It's the Arctic rainforest. And so, but what's very common about both areas is this is very new soil. So it's very fragile soil, so you really have to work with it a lot with cover crops and with amendments. And it's very, both in the Arctic rainforest and the subtropical rainforest, it's also very leaching and draining. And so you have to find ways that you can keep the nutrients in there for the soil. And so in our gardens, we started practicing no-till a few years ago, and we just started with experiments in there because I had a rototiller. I always rototilled before, and it looks pretty when you rototill.
Yeah.
It's all new and fluffy and ready to go. We're going to a no-till method because it's like everybody's connected under there, and then you break up these families, and then they all have to reconnect again.
Right.
And then that's when you have to start artificially feeding them, whether it's conventional or organic. So if you can keep them all together, talking and feeding each other, then what we're finding out is plants grow a lot better. I mean, and it's not like new science. It's very old.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what's so great about my interns is they make me walk the walk.
Right.
And so we actually planted half a bed we tilled and half a bed we didn't till. And we planted the same exact thing in there. And time after time when we did this, because I thought it was just a fluke, we had better germination, less bug problems, and a quicker crop.
In the harder soil.
In the soil that we practice no-till. But we always put in compost, we always mulched. And then because we're in a situation where we're basically clear cutting, because in a garden you always clear cut, you're not renewing like you do in an orchard, we'd always give it a little bit of fertilizer too. But then about a third of the year, every bed in our garden gets a cover crop. And so it's not, people call it resting, but what I call it is nutrifying. So we nutrify with a cover crop. And then we just rotate that year round.
The cover crop?
The cover crop, yeah. So one bed will have a cover crop and another bed won't have a cover crop. And so we're not quite clear cutting like most gardens are. Usually you plant a crop in there and then you harvest the broccoli and then it's clear and then you put something else in. So you got to do something in between to nutrify it, or you got to add fertilizer and nutrients. And so when we did the no-till, it was amazing. I mean, it was so amazing that we now just bend over our cover crop. We don't till it in at all. And we just plant right into it. It's like been done forever, and we just forgot, basically. We practice having a clean farm, and we pick up fruit every day, so there's no dead fruit on the ground. And that's so that we don't encourage pest problems, and part of the pest problems is fruit flies. When we first came here, we could hardly harvest anything without having extra protein in it, which was the fruit fly larva. And so we got in a program with the USDA where we spray an organic spray that smells like molasses, and they eat it and they dehydrate and die. And then the other part of it is the sanitation. Is going around the farm every day, picking up all the fruit off the ground and putting it into these compost tents that we have, so that when the fruit flies do hatch out, that they'll be caught in this compost tent. And then part of the compost tent is open with little teeny holes in it, like a mesh, and that's where the predatory wasp can go in and sting the larva. So that's that's one of the practices we did. And after we started doing that, we went from almost not being able to harvest anything without larvae in it to it's probably only 10% now.
Wow.
And it's usually when it hits the ground.
Very organized.
So it's like having a clean farm. This is our other part of our fertility program. And these are the mobile chicken cages. And so these are our hardworking girls. And they go around the farm. They make it around the farm about twice a year. And they know what this is all about. And they eat the weeds and mow the grass. And they add their little Nutri-Nuggets
Oh
to the
my
ground.
gosh, that's unbelievable.
So, and also the benefit that we get from them is we get eggs every day.
Yeah.
And so we use the eggs to make value-added products, and we use the eggs to eat. And then we also sell the eggs at the market, so they actually pay for themselves. All the chicken tractors eat about 60 pounds of food a week. And so instead of buying nitrogen fertilizer, we just feed it to the chickens. They process it, make it into a more usable form, and leave it down the orchard rows.
Wow.
And so this has been a big part of our system too. They're jealous because they haven't been moved yet. And everybody knows what's going on. If you're certified organic, you can't have chickens running through your garden. But our chickens are contained and they're not running through any food source. And so like they're in the orchards and they're not touching any of the food source, so they're still okay. Now the rules can always change, but right now because they're contained and they're not touching any food source, we're okay. They're really friendly too, so they might come flying out at you. But see, their eggs are right in here.
Oh yeah. So when you were starting up your soil and such, did you were microorganisms important in that whole thing? Did you like inoculate with any IMOs or mycorrhizals or anything like that? Was that part of the strategy or?
Well, anytime that you have compost going, you have microorganisms that are growing in there, and you can inoculate with like endo and ecto mycorrhiza if you don't think that you have it. Our compost was going really great guns, and so I wasn't too concerned that we didn't have microorganisms on the farm. We just fed them everything that was on the farm and made it very, very diverse. We would get huge compost piles going. And then in order to make the community, like what you're talking about, we couldn't compost or mulch the whole farm, but every 6 feet we have a little family, and we would put, like 4 times a year, we put compost down, and then we put mulch on top of that, and then it's 12 or 15 feet between the rows. And so what we're hoping is that eventually all those microorganisms grow and they connect to each other, because that was as best as we could do.
I see.
And, you know, I'm pretty sure that we have a lot of communities that are going under there, because we're seeing really good health from our trees now. There's cuttings, there's seeds, there's air layers, and then we did purchase some grafted trees because it was going to take us too long to graft them. And then we actually dug each hole by hand with an O-hoe because we didn't want to bring more heavy equipment onto the farm and disturb the soil even more. And then we planted each tree with 5 gallons of soil, 5 gallons of mulch, and compost. So big piles. It's basically 1/3 nitrogen, 2/3 carbon, and we add a little bit of inoculant, which is our old compost pile, into it. So we're adding all those microorganisms to kind of give it, kind of like yeast that you add to bread, to give it that little boost, and we just let it do its work.
Do you use worms?
If you build it, they will come.
Do you cover it?
That we do cover with landscape cloth. That isn't going to have any food for the fruit flies, and then we stick a temperature probe in it. It goes up. If it doesn't go up, we mix it. But if it goes up, we let it go up to like 150. If it gets past 150, we open it and we cool it down. And then when it starts coming back down, and it gets back down to like 90, we put the outsides inside, and then we let it go up again. And with our organic standards, we have to do it 5 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's where the soil food webs come in. You know, just learning more about that. It's not new science, but it hasn't been documented very long. The first guy that I worked with in Alaska told me that in Alaska you couldn't farm organically, and he said it was magic what we did, And then, a few years later, there's Sylvia Ingham telling us all about the soil food web. And before, maybe we did call it magic because we didn't understand it. And now it's science. It's crazy. And that's like 20 years ago, so it just hasn't, it's been there all the time, but before we called it magic and now we call it science. Kind of a crazy thing. It's just who I am. We've always been organic. We want it to be safe for the environment. We want it to be safe for the workers. We care about what we eat. We also do a lot of education to teach people how to garden and farm organic, and it's just who we are. And it's always been who we are.